Real Deal podcast. I'm your host, Cyril Gerald-Quinn. We are back live and on YouTube. Of course, we will be posting this all over YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, anywhere you can find a podcast. But we wanted to switch it up a little bit. I know, if you miss seeing my face and not my slides, so doing something a little bit different, or what we used to do per se, in terms of having live YouTube podcast. So I'm certainly happy to be with you on this 4th of August 2021. We're gonna go over the NBA free agent NBA free agency. Still not over, of course, but most of the main players, most of the main principals have been signed. Still, there's still a couple of top guys. There's still a couple of guys like John Collins that are out there from Atlanta. We'll talk about that. Dennis Schroeder is still out there. Danny Green is still out there. And by the way, if anything has happened during this podcast, then I apologize in advance. So, the Lakers. Last time I spoke to you, they had traded for Russell Westbrook. We discussed that, and of course that we knew at the time that they had to fill out their roster, and they have done that in a big way as they've added the likes of Carmelo Anthony, Kendrick Nunn, Wayne Ellington, Taylor Horton Tucker, and also Kent Bazemore, Trevor Ariza, and of course Dwight Howard. Four of those guys, of course, Dwight Howard, Ariza, Bazemore, used to play for the Lakers in their second stints with the Lakers. I think Wayne Ellington too. Um, I try to block out that era where the Lakers missed uh, the playoffs 10 straight years. So excuse me if I forget somebody that actually played for the team. That's me, not wanting to go back into that time where the Lakers just were in a 10-year drought of not making the playoffs. So everybody's excited. Um, Laker fans are just going crazy. Of course, I'm a lifelong Laker fan. Everybody's excited about the new additions. They basically want to hand the Lakers the championship, um, and what have you. And again, I think they addressed the shooting. Ellington, Ariza, Nunn, even Carmelo Anthony has improved as a three-point shooter. So I think they have addressed that aspect for the likes of Anthony Davis and LeBron James needing spacing, needing extra spacing to operate. The problem is, and the major question mark going into the season will be about their defense. KCP, KCP, along with I just got along with Alex Caruso. I had a brain fart there. Alex Caruso, and also even Kyle Kuzman were three above average defensive players. KCP and Alex Caruso were elite perimeter defensive players. A matter of fact, when Anthony Davis and LeBron James missed considerable time the last couple of months of the season, the Lakers defense did not slip. They finished with the number one defense in the league going into the playoffs. So those losses cannot be. You just can't brush those losses off and say, hey, those guys were spare parts. Those guys, we know they're not stars, but those guys were excellent defensive players. So now it puts more pressure, of course, on Anthony Davis, who is, of course, one of two or three best defensive players in the league, and of course, a 37-year-old, or soon to be 37-year-old LeBron James. Remember, every time like a guy like Kendrick Nunn, or Carmelo Anthony, or Wayne Ellington, or Taylor Horton Tucker, or even I'm leaving out one name. Even every time those guys like that, Kent Bazemore, every time those guys like that are in the game, they're going to be targeted. They're going to be targeted. Period. Switch on him. They're gonna be looking for those matchups. Yeah, I want Kendrick Nunn guarding me. I want Carmelo Anthony guarding me. So that cannot be dismissed in regards to these new additions. So again, the main thing here, I mean, this season, the Lakers season will come down to the health of LeBron James and of course uh, Anthony Davis, and also in how Russell Westbrook acquiesces to the team, and can he sacrifice? And again, we talked about that last podcast. Can he sacrifice for the for the greater good of the team trying to win a championship? That's what the season's going to come down to. But I don't think I have to see them actually play before there's still some question marks. I can't sit up here and tell you that the Lakers that you should hand them, forget about the NBA championship, because I still think that goes through Brooklyn if they're healthy. But I'm not even going to hand them the Western Conference until I see this play out in regards to how these guys are gonna how they're gonna incorporate these guys, and are these guys going to defend at a high enough level? They lost a lot of defense, and that could not be dismissed when you're talking about trying to win the NBA championship. I'm not as concerned about the age. We've seen, we've seen a number of teams who are veteran teams win championships. That 2014 Spurs team had a bunch of older players. The 2011 Dallas Mavericks, the '06 Heat team. So, like most teams that win championships have an average age over 30. You're not seeing too many. I mean, the Warriors of 2015 were an anomaly. I think their average age was like 27, 26, maybe even younger than that. Probably, I think it was like 26. So I'm not at the age thing doesn't concern me as much. They're still young enough in certain spots, like Taylor Horton Tucker and Kendrick Nunn. Those guys are relatively young. Kent Bazemore's, only 32. Um, those guys, are relatively young. So they're young enough in enough spots. Wayne Ellington isn't old. Isn't that old to be? Isn't that old? And you're not depending on him as far as athleticism anyway. So I'm not as concerned about the age. I'm not. Again, the defense will be a major question mark, and Frank Vogel definitely have his work cut out for him. With the schemes, with his defensive principles, trying to get guys who have not over their careers defended to defend at a level to where you're not putting too much of an onus on Anthony Davis and LeBron James. More so LeBron James. Anthony Davis is still only 28, and Anthony Davis we know can cover up a number of mistakes with his presence in the middle defensively. We understand that. I mean, I can make a case of Anthony Davis being the best defensive player in the league. Like he's in that, he's on that level. As far as Miami goes, big, a number of signings for Miami. Of course, it starts out with Kyle Lowry going to the Heat. Kyle Lowry, of course, will be in the Hall of Fame one day. Certainly in the conversation of greatest Toronto Raptor ever. Right there with Vince Carter, DeMar DeRozan, and also, I know people might disagree with me. I have to put Kawhi Leonard there as well. That bringing them that championship even only in one year. But Kyle, this was a move that I think was necessary for Miami. I know Kyle Lowry. That's a lot of money. 3 years, 35 years old. He's not going to get any better, but he is still a guy who you don't have to put the onus of the offense on. He's still one of the toughest point guards in the league. He's still an excellent defensive point guard. Can knock down the 3-point shot, and should fit like a glove playing alongside Jimmy Butler. The key to me for Miami is Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. Those guys have to take a leap in order for Miami to even sniff Brooklyn or Milwaukee. Period. Yeah, they have to take a leap. Bam Adebayo was an All-Star last year, but I haven't been impressed with Bam. He didn't play well. He was awful in the playoffs, and he really hasn't. If you've been watching the Olympics, he hasn't played well in the Olympics as well either. He really hasn't. So I see a lack of aggression. I see someone who, you know, still doesn't trust his mid-range shot to the level that he should at this point. And of course, Tyler Hero, whose regular season numbers might have been not that far off from the previous season, but playoffs he was awful. He averaged like 9 points in the playoffs. He was back on the bench, basically he was in the rotation, but he really wasn't. He was a non-factor in that four-game sweep against Miami. Against Milwaukee. So he has to come back, and maybe I think the thing with Hero is I think he was smelling his got a little fame. You see him on Instagram. You see him, look like he was enjoying being a celebrity a little bit too much. Maybe now this year will bring him back down to earth, humble him, and so he can come back and bounce back and be the player that he was in the 2020 bubble. That's that is, I feel like I'm not worried about Jimmy Butler. He'll be fine. Um, they added, they added PJ Tucker. Even though I'm not a big PJ Tucker fan, he does fit well with them. All he has to do is defend and make corner threes, and the Heat culture, whatever. He fits like a glove when it comes to that. So, and also they'll getting Markieff Morris. He's the worst out of the two Morris twins. He's not as good as his brother, but he did have some moments in 2020 with the Lakers going to on their road to the finals and to the championship. So he's a body. He's not, I wouldn't count on too much from him per se, but again, he should fit right into their culture. And Miami has a way of bringing out the best of some of these role players um, that come who are veteran players off other teams. So again, this is Pat Riley swinging for the fences here. This is Pat Riley swinging for the fences. Pat Riley once before he retires and Eric Spoelstra takes over as team president and the head of all operations in Miami with the Miami Heat. Pat Riley wants another chip. We know how competitive this guy is. He's one of the all-time greats as far as um, team presidents and in terms of that. He again very even at his age he is still a super competitor, and he wants another championship in the worst way. And if you're Miami, you don't want us to feel like that 2020 finals appearance was a fluke. Because if they follow up getting swept by Milwaukee with another early exit, especially adding a Kyle Lowry and some of the pieces they add, then people are going to definitely think that 2020 finals appearance was a fluke. So again, as of right now, I will put them just a slight notch below Brooklyn and Milwaukee as far as teams to beat in the Eastern Conference. We'll see what Philly does. Right now, I would say they're better than Philly, to be honest with you. So we'll see what Philly does. But in Atlanta, I think those teams are basically are evenly matched in Atlanta. I would give them a slight edge maybe because of experience against Atlanta. But I think Atlanta is right there with Miami as far as when we start talking about the top tiers, the top teams in the Eastern Conference. We're gonna go over some winners and losers of the free agency so far. So, winner, number one winner had to be to me DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan, and again, when people were talking about he signs with the Bulls, 3 years, $85 million. Now again, he's coming off a year, despite the fact that how poorly San Antonio played this year. He did average 21 and 7 Um, has scored at least 20 points a game, averaged at least 20 points a game 8 straight years. We know how efficient he is from the mid range, one of the best mid range scorers in the league. Shot close to 50% from the field. We know he doesn't shoot threes, doesn't only attempted 74 threes last season. So the majority of his damage is going to come in the mid range. Um, 80, it's not so much, listen, I think people are knocking the contract. If you're the Bulls and haven't been relevant for the last 5 years, you have to overpay. I mean, that's all it is to it. You have to overpay. Um, getting him alongside Alex Caruso as well as Lonzo Ball, they have significantly upgraded talent. So you have Ball, Levine, Caruso. You have Ball, Levine, DeRozan. You still have marketing as a trade chip, and Vucevic. That team should be good enough to make the playoffs. That team, and you still have Kobe White coming off the bench. That team should be good enough to make the playoffs. Now again, a lot of people didn't like DeRozan getting as much money as he did. A lot of people think the Bulls were bidding against themselves, which they probably were. But the bottom line is, when you've been down as long as they've been down, and when you are desperate, the Bulls are desperate to make the playoffs this year. Desperate, similar to where Atlanta was last year. They're desperate to make the playoffs. Probably you got to overpay, and that contract in a couple of years will be a tradable will be a tradable contract. You can move that contract in 2 years. And again, DeRozan's still a very good player. It's not like, I know he's 31 years. I think DeRozan's 32, 31, going to be 32. I think he's 31. But he's still, I mean, you're talking about a guy that's going to give you 20. He can score 20 points a game in his sleep. And we've seen him score on teams that made the playoffs. So he's not a guy, you can't put him in the category of bad, you know, of, you know, scorer on a bad team. No, we've seen him score. We've seen him, he's been All Star. He's been All NBA a couple of times. He, he's been the top leading scorer on the team that made it to the conference finals back in 2016. DeRozan's a very good player. So again, you can't have it both ways though. If you're Chicago, you can't say, well, the team has been terrible. Then they go out, spend the money, and are trying to win and complain about that as well. You say what you want about them, they have significantly upgraded the talent. They are a much better team than what they were last year. Chris Paul resigns as expected with the Phoenix Suns, 4 years, $120 million. When he's done, um, he's going to have in excess of $420 million of contracts. $420 million. He's going to be one of the highest paid players in NBA history in terms of total contracts. So his agent, whoever his agent, Chris Paul gets his money. Right? Like I give again, he's one of the reasons why he was able to get this money based on how he negotiated the last collective bargaining agreement. He was on the Players Association, president of the Players Association. So he definitely had himself in mind when that, in terms of taking care of older players. And again, give Chris Paul credit for that. A lot of older players got paid big money, and Chris Paul is a big reason for that, for his negotiations during the last CBA. But he keeps getting these contracts. He has maintained his level of play. Second team All NBA, of course, led along with Devin Booker, Phoenix Suns to within 2 games of an NBA championship. Phoenix will be right there again in the Western Conference. I never thought that he was going to leave. If Phoenix was willing to pay, that was the only question with Sarver, who is notoriously a cheap owner, was going to be willing to pay. If Sarver was going to be willing to pay into the luxury tax, then there was no question that Chris Paul was going to stay. He didn't want to leave Phoenix. He has his family as a home. in Los Angeles. His family's there, so he did not want. He was not coming. He was not coming to the Knicks. He wasn't coming to a team on the East Coast. He wasn't going to New Orleans. That just wasn't going to happen. So he is right where he should be, where he belongs, and they will try to make another run at a championship come this year. Stephen Curry signs his second $200 million contract, a 5 year extension worth $214 million. He, when he's done, could exceed over $470 million in terms of total contracts, which would make him the highest paid player in terms of total contracts in NBA history. I think when it's said and done, that in the next 5 to 10 years, that probably Giannis is going to have that title, considering especially if he stays his entire career with Milwaukee. Curry, if you remember, Curry certainly making up for lost time. If you remember, one of his first contracts in Golden State was like a 4 year, $44 million contract, and it was a one of the best contracts in the history of the NBA, considering the production during that time period. He won 2 MVPs and led them to a championship. And the reason why that contract was so low, of course, was because they were at the time we didn't know Curry was going to last as long as he has last with the ankle issues that he had early in his career. So they gave him a contract that was kind of like a team friendly contract, and again, that contract allowed Golden State to become Golden State because they were allowed to have, in essence, sign Draymond, Klay Thompson. Later on, of course, add Kevin Durant, and we get 3 championships in 4 years. But he is more than making up for that now. He's the first player in NBA history to have multiple $200 million contracts. He's going to have multiple supermax contracts. He gets everything. The 35% of the 35% of the team's salary cap, because he's been a league. He's been with the same team, so they had like he's getting the super duper max amount of money that you can get for a player. Of course, he's been in the league over 10 years. So again, he's well deserving of that. This guy is still legitimately a top five player, one of the greatest point guards of all time, and certainly Golden State will be amongst the leading teams coming out the Western Conference to contend for a championship. Now we go to the losers, the San Antonio Spurs. And at some point, the San Antonio Spurs were going to hit. This moment was going to happen for the Spurs. They had been near at the top of basketball for well over 20 years, but as of right now, 2000 August 4th, 2021, the San Antonio Spurs are a bad organization. They go out there, they sign Doug McDermott, and they sign Zach Collins. Zach Collins gets $22 million, 3 years, $22 million. Zach Collins has not played basketball since 2019. Didn't play all of last year. Has been repeatedly injured, um, and somehow he got $22 million, which I wonder who was San Antonio bidding against. Who was going to give Zach Collins a multi-year contract for $22 million? Doug McDermott is a very good shooter. He's developed, made himself into a good NBA player, but Doug McDermott does not make sense on a team that's going nowhere. Doug McDermott would make sense on a team that's contending for a championship. He's Golden State, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, that type of team. Even a team that's a playoff contender. Doug McDermott does not make any sense on the San Antonio Spurs whatsoever. Zero. So I don't know what San Antonio is doing at this point. Um, they're in a bad spot. There's clearly, again, he's one of the greatest coaches of all time. But we understand that Popovich has lost something some on the fastball. Has lost a bit on the fastball. The fastball, it was 98. Now it might be 92, 91. But again, nothing lasts forever. They were on top from 1999 to up until 2018, 2000 up until 2018, they were contenders. Or 2017, they had over 20 years. One of the greatest runs in recent memory. So it was not going to last forever. And they right now they are completely or should be in rebuilding mode. And again, call a horrible break with what happened with Kawhi Leonard. Let's just call it, that's just called, Kawhi Leonard is supposed to be a San Antonio Spurs, supposed to be continually leading that team, to being on that team and leading that team to being a championship contender. The New Orleans Pelicans, I don't understand what the hell they're doing right now. They allow Lonzo Ball. They don't match Lonzo Ball. He goes to the Bulls. They signed Garrett Temple and Devontae Graham. Um, I yeah, I just don't. I don't get what the plan is. Um, they're on their third coach in 3 years. It is a distinct possibility that Zion Williamson could become the first player not to sign a rookie extension, the rookie max extension, and just outright become a free agent in uh, in 2023 or excuse me, in 2022. That is on the table, and that like I never you would never think because that is a player's first major contract. That's a player's first major contract. But their organization right now is one of the worst ran organizations in the sport. Um, David Griffin, I don't care how many picks he has. What are you gonna do with those picks? Like I don't know. That's at a certain point. Like what are you gonna do with those picks? He's got to get the hopefully he has the right coach. But they have some serious, they have some major issues, and they right now they are one of the five worst run franchises in the NBA. That's all there is to it. And finally, Dennis Struder. Dennis Struder during the season turned down a 4-year, $84 million extension. He bet on himself. He was looking for a $100 million contract, and to be honest with you, he will be lucky. He'll be lucky to get 40 million. He'll be lucky to get 50 million or 40 million. Lucky. I could see a 3-year, 45 million dollar contract, which again, any of us would love $15 million a year. But 4 years, $84 million. We're talking 20. Talking like 20, what, 21 million a year that he was looking at. 21 million a year that he turned down. So he definitely falls under the category of loser as of right now. As far as what the contenders did, you look at some of the teams that will be. We already talked about the Lakers, of course, and Miami Heat. But you look at some of the teams that will be looking to contend for a championship. Milwaukee, you have to love what Milwaukee did. A lot of people at the beginning were concerned with Milwaukee because they were concerned with Milwaukee and were wondering what they were going to do. They first they catch a major break by with Bobby Portis taking basically a hometown discount. He could have got more money and went elsewhere. He likes the culture. He loves being there. The fans love him. Um, 2 years, $9 million. So they keep Portis. They signed Rodney Hood. They signed Ojale. They re-signed not Grant Hill, George Hill, and of course their bench next year. You're gonna have Portis, Hood, Ojale, Connington, and Hill. That's a hell of a bench. And of course, DiVincenzo will be back starting. He missed the playoffs, the duration of the playoffs with the foot injury. I mean, Milwaukee's a better. I mean, they're better. That's all there is to it. This team, this next year's team on paper, will be better than this team. Last year, there were questions they had. Of course, they were not deep with their bench. They were thin in terms of their bench. They've certainly addressed that. Rodney Hood, we know, can be a dead-eye shooter. Ochale can be is a tough, excellent defensive player, tough player. You know what Portis brings with his shooting and energy. George Hill is a excellent backup point guard to have, veteran. Um, been in a ton of playoff games, so we know what he brings to the table. So I absolutely love what Milwaukee did. Denver, they get pick up Jeff Green. He leaves Brooklyn. They re-sign JaMychal Green, and then they go out. They sign re-sign Harris. They re-sign Will Barton, and they also re-sign Austin Rivers. So some nice quiet moves from Denver. I like Jeff Green is a perfect fit for what they do. He can play small ball four. He can shoot the basketball. Still has some athleticism left in the tank. Some gas left in the tank from that standpoint. Of course, the key for them, there are two things that could possibly raise them to be a championship caliber team. That's number one. What happens with Jamal Murray? How you know when he does come back, if he does come back, how effective will he be? And of course, Michael Porter Jr. has to continue to take another step up. Last year, he played well during the regular season. Did not have a good playoff run for the most part. So you're looking for some more consistency from him in the postseason. Big year for him because they also can sign him to max extension. They also can sign him to a max extension. So we'll see what happens with that. But I thought some nice moves for Denver. Nothing flashy, nothing splashy, but just those kind of quiet, under the radar moves. Utah besides Mike Conley Jr. Think he got 3 for 68. They also signed Rudy Gay and Hassan Whiteside. So you know. When Hassan Whiteside wants to play, he can be effective. Depends on which Hassan Whiteside shows up. Rudy Gay is a solid veteran who can score. Really has played well the last couple of years. He's a guy that come off their bench and be effective. Played been around for a while. So I'm fine with that. They had to re-sign Mike Conley Jr. But again, we know Utah probably is going to have to make a move in order to get to that next level, in order to compete with the likes of the Lakers and even Denver for that matter. I still don't trust Utah, this particular roster, to be a legit contender to come out a threat to the Lakers or even Denver to come out the West. They still need more. They still need to make a move, make some type of trade. We'll see what they do over the course of the season. Brooklyn re-signed. Of course, they lost Jeff Green, but they did re-sign Blake Griffin, Bruce Brown. They also added Patty Mills. So you certainly had to like, and also James Johnson as well from as he leaves Dallas. So Brooklyn, the Jeff Green. I'm sure they would like to keep Jeff Green, and they lost, of course, Spencer Dinwiddie, which they lost him. He was gone for the majority of the season, so they certainly expected him to leave. But again, I thought keeping Blake Griffin was important. Bruce Brown had some moment, had a nice year, and Patty Mills is a shooter, certainly a shooter and a veteran point guard that will certainly help them during the postseason. And Golden State added Otto Porter Jr., which is a nice pickup. But again, Golden State is not. This will not be the team that you see coming into the season. I still think Golden State is going to make a move. I don't know what that move is going to be, but I still expect Golden State to make a big trade between now and before the season starts. So there you go in terms of the contenders. Again, one of the big things to me is Milwaukee really catching a break and keeping Bobby Portis, because there was a lot of talk that Bobby Portis was gone, and he would go out for greener pastures in terms of getting the money. So that to me was big time for them to keep him on that team that won a championship. As far as real thoughts, we could be headed towards a showdown in the Olympics with Kevin Durant facing Luka. Slovakia, as I'm butchering his name, Slovenia looks basically almost unbeatable. Luka's the only player I even know off can name on the team, but he's been phenomenal. He's been the best player in these Olympics by far. He's been the best player. Again, I think the USA has played better in the last couple of games. Durant has picked up his game, and I think now they can kind of smell a gold medal appearance. Now, again, they have a tough game against Australia. Australia beat them earlier in the exhibition, so that will be a tough game. Australia has some good players. Thibault, Patty Mills. They have some, they have some couple of NBA guys. I think that'll be a highly competitive game, but I expect it to be Slovenia and USA facing off for the gold medal matchup. A couple guys got to get max extensions. We see Shea Gilgeous-Alexander get 5 years, $172 million. He had a phenomenal year, like one of the best, quietest, great years that you'll ever see. He played. He played so well that they had to sit him for the last 15 to 20 games so that they could tank. That's how well he played. So that guy can be. I think that guy is only 23 years old. 23 years old. He's going to be an all-star. It's just a matter of when, not if, but when. We see Trey Young gets his extension, 5 years, $207 million. He should have been on the Olympic team without question. And we're still, of course, waiting to see what happens with John Collins with Atlanta. Now, apparently, Collins turned down a 5 year, $125 million deal from Atlanta. That is a report. Those are reports there's a report going around that he turned down a 5 year, 5 year, $125 million contract. Um, I First of all, I said this right off the bat that I wouldn't even resign him if I were Atlanta myself. Apparently they value him, highly. Apparently they think highly of him, but I would not resign John Collins. I just think you have too many other players that you're going to have to pay. They have other wing players. Um, Again, he at best is a number three on a. He could be a number three on a championship team. Maybe, probably he's probably even a number four on a championship team. To be honest with you, like if he were on the Lakers, he'd probably be their fourth best player. If he were on the Bucks, he'd be their fourth best player. Brooklyn, he'd be their fourth best player. Even somebody like Miami, so he's probably closer to being a four, maybe a three, but I'll be leaning towards a fourth best player on a championship team. Not giving that guy $25 million. Like I'm sorry, that's there's just no way. So we'll see um, how long that standoff takes place. I don't know. Atlanta is bidding against themselves. No one is going to I don't see anybody matching that contract. I really don't. I don't see it. First of all, there are not that many teams that have a lot of money left. Like most of these teams who had a ton of salary cap space have used it all up, including the Knicks both the Knicks and the Bulls. And I don't see him on the Spurs. I don't think the Spurs. Maybe I don't think the Spurs have stooped that low to give a max contract to a guy who cannot lead a franchise. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast, free agency, NBA free agency special. I will see you next week on the next edition of the Real Deal Podcast. Enjoy the rest of your week. This podcast will be up on the rest of my platforms in a couple of hours. So stay tuned. Be on the lookout for that. I'm out.